the wonderful pleasure of having a dear friend, someone who I love, not only because of his pastoral heart and just what he brings to our denomination. He's just the epitome of being a pastor. He's also an incredible musician, which I love. I love playing with him. I love hearing him lead. Actually, that's how I met him. So please, I want to welcome my friend, Josef Rasheed. How are you, my brother?
I'm doing great, man. And it's great to be with you again. It's great to see you. It's great to talk with you. It's great just to be in your presence, even though we are virtual.
Yes, and where are you? Where are you at right now?
I'm in DeSoto, Texas, in my home, shelter in place. So here I am.
What's the closest, biggest city that we would know in Texas to give
So
you a
the
location?
closest, biggest city is Dallas. We're exactly 11 miles from downtown Dallas.
Oh, okay. Very good. Joseph, do you remember how we met? Do you remember the first time that we met?
Yes, I do. I remember the very first
Really?
time we met. We met in Green Lake, Wisconsin, as a matter of fact. You were playing guitar.
Really? Was that your first gig? Was that your first gig, the feast?
That was not my first gig, but it was my first feast.
Oh,
And so I
okay.
played the year before and in Grand Rapids, I believe it was Grand Rapids.
Huh.
Yeah. So this year at the feast, in 2008, we met. Remember the tent was flooded? They had to move the tent area back, and
Yeah.
it was the third time that they moved it. So we met, we were playing guitar, and we just kind of gelled because we came from the same neighborhood. At that time, you were living in San Diego, I believe.
Right.
And as we just began to talk and as we just began to share, I felt like what the Bible says, the soul of Jonathan was knit with David. And I was the David. I was the poor shepherd boy, and I was knit with you, the boy who had everything. You know,
Yeah,
you were the king's son.
Wow. I thought it was a midwinter. I remember a midwinter specifically when you led with Paul Lazard, I believe, or someone else. I'm not quite sure, but you led, and it was, yeah, I've been leading midwinters and feasts and chicks, and so if for the people that are not in the covenant, they wonder what we're talking about. There are annual events
Yeah.
or annual events in some cases, but you're such a great musician. You have I've always appreciated your pastoral heart, starting with music, because the mistakes that I made when I started with leading worship for covenant events was to impose myself and to kind of demand from people, and people went along with them just because they were really gracious. But you had this really wonderful technique of bringing people in and inviting people in and inviting them to do things with you, whether it was a step or it was this, and people just followed. And I'm like, I've learned. I actually use some of that still today.
Well, that was one of the other things that I learned from you, because you were the first person I ever seen in the covenant to do a dance. We were in Green Lake, Wisconsin, in a tent on a half-made wooden stage, and you had people dancing. The stage was slanted. We were sliding back and forth. But I remember that, so I got that from you.
well, and of course, you come from a musical family. You have amazing friends throughout the music industry, and you're just a master musician. We are so privileged and so fortunate to have you as part of the covenant. And tell us a little bit about your international role.
Well, my international role, I'm the Regional Coordinator for Africa, which serve globally in the Evangelical Covenant Church. So I go to 7 countries in Africa, and I visit our missionaries and also our missionary partners. My role is expanded a little bit because now I meet with presidents of churches, denominations. I meet with presidents of countries, and I meet with political leaders as I'm able to.
Wow.
It's a great opportunity to meet real people, to be down to earth. We travel, we go to backwoods places that no one would ever think of. We travel out in the bush country. Very seldom do we go to major cities, but when I'm in a major city, that's the opportunity to meet with a lot of the leaders from various denominations, from various political organizations. And it's a wonderful opportunity to get to meet people and to find out how small the world is in this vastness of its size.
And it is small, isn't it?
It really
It is
is.
small.
It really is. It really is small. You know, one time I was we were in South Africa actually, and I'm talking to a young lady whose her son had went to school in Pietermaritzburg, which is a city in South Africa. And while we're having this conversation, I say, well, that's the city I'm going to. And it turns out I'm going to meet with a group her son is working with. The world is very
Wow.
small.
Very small. So, you're African American.
Yes.
How does it feel to go to the motherland? I can't even, I don't even know how to ask this properly. How does it feel for you to be able to do that function to where it all began, to where your ancestors are? And of course, part of the identity of the African American experience is not wanting to connect you back to where you're from and not knowing exactly where you're from, even though we have some ideas, right, by the way that we look, etc. How does this feel for you? How is that? I'm sure it's an incredible experience, but does it bring out any you're not African, you're African American, and in some people would say you're not even American, right? I mean, it's like we and I say we because Latinos are in the same boat. We're Americans, but we're not Americans, and sometimes we don't belong. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just know you so well. Tell me a little bit. How does it feel for you to be able to function in that capacity?
My very first trip, I went with Kirk Peterson, who was the executive minister over then Covenant World Mission. And so I went to Congo, and there was a parade, and he said, just say what I say and do what I do. He jumps out the Jeep, he's shaking people's hands, he's saying bote, which is a greeting in the Congolese language, or else he's saying bonjour. And so I'm following what he's saying, and these people are just greeting us. The procession had to be more than a mile long. And we're shaking hands, we're greeting everyone. And all of a sudden, this older man whose hair is all white looks me in my face and says, welcome home. First time in my life I'd ever been told, welcome home. I broke down in the street and I cried like a baby. Because in a sense, it did feel like I was at home. I saw people who looked like me. I saw people who dressed like me. I saw the colors. I saw many things that reminded me of growing up. And so it was an experience that really, really wrecked my brain. And he wouldn't let go of my hand as I'm crying in the middle of the street. So finally, he says, you need to go north and see your people. So I thought to myself, he's senile. He doesn't really know what he's saying. I said, no, I'm not from here. He says, I know. And he's speaking plain English with a British accent. He says, I know where you're from, but we don't change. So once again, I'm crying in the middle of the street. So he says, you need to go north and see your people. I said, you've seen people who look like me? He says, yes, because we don't change. I've seen your people. So that was very exciting to know that there was people who looked like me. There were people who were my size, my height, my weight, that there were people who I had a connection with that I've never seen before. It was a connection of culture where I saw the women cooking, and I remembered my godmother and the older women in my family, how they would get together and cook, how they would share meals. It was a connection of many cultures when I'd see the old men as they would sit down and talk and laugh, and the children would play around them. So it was a meaningful experience, whereas they know why they do things. We know what we're doing, but we don't necessarily know why. Now, you made a statement that's very, very true. I'm not African. And I was told as a kid growing up in elementary school, the African people, they don't like you. They don't want you to be around them. They consider you to be lazy. You're trifling. They don't have anything to do with you. And the Africans who came here, it seemed like they were telling the truth because we had very little in common.
Right.
Well, when I went there, I found out that wasn't true. And I was in Cameroon when I was meeting with the Secretary of State, who said to me, you are my brother. And I said, how can you say that? He says, it is of no coincidence of yours for what happened to you. I said, do you know my story? He says, yes, we do know the story. But do you know how many days our ancestors went to those beaches and waited for you to return.
Wow.
So to come back is very meaningful. Every time I go, it's meaningful to learn, to discover, to see, to understand why we do different things the way we do it, why our values are different, and to find out the history of our people in a different way.
Well, wow, that is profound. It's profound. You know, what I found when I go back to Guatemala, I was born in Guatemala, Central America. And when I go back, it seems odd to me that there's so many Guatemalans there, because I'm just not used to being, you know, with all Guatemalans. Growing up in Chicago, you had Mexicans, you had Colombians, you had Assyrians, you had Polish people, we had African Americans, we had all of this, you know, a variety of people that, you know, there's not just one majority. So thank you for sharing that. That's profound and meaningful. And you know, would you have thought that it would be so profound at this stage in your life? I mean,
I never thought it would be profound. I always thought there would be some sort of opposition, that there would be some sort of difficulty, but there was none whatsoever. I mean, they opened their arms, they wrapped their arms around me, and they brought me in, and it was absolutely fantastic. I do have to tell you this one story, though.
please.
I got to tell you this story. I'm sorry, but when I went to South Sudan, they said, "You are Joseph." And I said, yeah. They said, "You are Joseph." And they kept saying it over and over again, the men who I would meet. These were mostly pastors. And so finally they said, "No, you don't understand. You were the one who was taken away from us, so God could bless him to bring him back to us."
Wow.
Oh man, there's so much spirituality there. There's so much intense relationship there. There's so much brotherhood, so much connection there. And it makes you sad when you come back to a country and you get mistreated and you get looked at differently and you get, you know, all these other things that go on here that you don't get.
Well, Joseph, you know, as you know, we've been plagued by horrible news, by horrible events of modern day lynchings, of, it's not even easy to express. Someone would look at you as a very successful pastor, a successful musician, and now you have an international role. You're well educated, you're tall, you're handsome, you're distinguished, you know, and would say, well, you know, I'm sure that Joseph, it doesn't really count himself as a person that would be in fear or would think that he would be discriminated against. Would they be right to assume something like that?
Absolutely not. They would be more incorrect than any person in the world. You see, because you know me and you know these things about me, you're willing to trust me. And trust is the foundation for every relationship. Until you get to know a person, and whether they're black or white or brown or yellow, whatever color they are, until you get to know a person and you can invest your trust in them, you're not willing to hear their story and understand their predicament. Trust is foundational in every relationship. And so when people think that I have not been discriminated against, I mean, I was discriminated against by several people in different circumstances. I remember going to Windsor, Colorado, and church plant training and walking down the street from the college, going downtown to the breakfast shop. The neighbors surrounding the college in Windsor began to say many slurs towards me and my wife as we were walking down the street. They didn't know me. They had no reason to know me. But yes, I feel that same pressure. I feel that same tension. I felt it all my life, ever since I was a child. When I was a kid, I was criticized because of my father. And my father, who was not white, but he passed for white in the military, I was criticized because I was called, they said I had a white daddy. And then I was criticized by Black people who said I wasn't fully Black.
Oh my
so
goodness.
There's criticism on both sides of it. And then I walk into a store right now and the security guard will follow me. They will look at me like I'm suspicious, like I'm getting ready to steal something. So yes, I am subject to the same treatment to the same condescending attitudes. I am subject to the same brutality, to the same armed shooting of an unarmed man. I am subject to the brutality of the police, just like every other Black man in America.
So, thank you for sharing that. This is not light conversation. This is certainly not a casual conversation. But I think it's important that for all of our pastors, all of our leadership teams, all of our members in the Central Conference to hear that their leader internationally, their representative to Africa, feels that way in his own country. And of course, we don't have to go so far away from the news. One of the reasons I called you was to make sense of this horrible crime, George Floyd, that was choked to death. And as a person of color, I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. You don't have to convince me. As I've gotten older, it's gotten easier for me. When I was younger, I was being more aggressive, or it's just more threatening, I guess. But I still get stopped by the police when I go to certain places in the Central Conference to find out why I'm there. There's also the Chicago license plate that doesn't help me, I think. But George Floyd, you're an African American. Mm-hmm. You have children. You have grandchildren.
Yes.
How do you, and you're a pastor, so people come to you to help you process this thing that you have to process yourself for yourself first. And I think that's one of the hardest jobs of pastors, to process things with people that we haven't processed ourselves yet, because we're on the line and our heart is tender and open for this. So tell me, how is this viewed, especially after, the Ahmaud incident just, a couple of months ago?
Well, it's not just after the Ahmaud, it's after every single killing. Everyone has a pain and an agony. Now, before this story about Big Floyd, and I call him Big Floyd as his friends would call him. I've never met him, but his friends called him Big Floyd. And just like I have brothers and sisters in the kingdom that I've never met, but they're still mine, this is still my friend. This is my brother in the struggle. And so before that incident came out, there was another disturbing incident about a woman in Central Park who had an animal, and he was unleashed. And after she was asked to put her dog on a leash, she responded with, I'm going to call the police and tell them you're an African-American male and you're attacking me. She knew exactly what she was doing. I saw that post on Memorial Day, and I said, I'm not going to mention it because it's Memorial Day. Everybody's chilling. Everybody's kicking back. They're enjoying their family time, their off days. But in the morning when I woke up, there was the story of Big Floyd. Mm. The Bible warns us to be angry, but do not sin.
James, yeah.
And so our sin can be in our hatred toward a police officer. Our sin can be our hatred toward a particular race. Our sin can be our hatred of an individual who we don't know. That could be our sin. So instead of directing my anger toward an individual who I don't know these officers, I had to channel that, and I had to say, how are my people feeling? What are we grieving? How hurt are we? Because it seems like it's open season on my family. On my family is my son-in-laws, my son, my grandchildren, my friends. This is open season on my brothers, and it's just not right. So in order to process how I felt, I had to stop and think about it. And I'd say this is happening again, but realize it's a system that must be changed. That's one of the things I like about the Covenant Church. I remember my first meeting in Grand Rapids of Glenn Palmberg. He was the president of the Covenant then. And he showed a video of himself being in Oakland, California, which is the city I grew up in. And he was at the Allen Temple Baptist Church with J. Alfred Smith, Reverend Dr. J. Alfred Smith. And while he was there, I'm looking at the video because J. Alfred Smith is a relative of mine. And so I said, oh my God, you got my cousin on the screen, you know? And so I'll go up to Glenn Palmberg to tell him I appreciated the video. That was my cousin. And Glenn Palmberg looks at me and my wife and he says, you're new here, but stay with us. We're not perfect, but we're trying. We're trying to embrace the unknown realities. So stay with us, teach us, stick with us. And then he walked away. I felt like, what just happened, you know? But that was very real to me, to hear someone saying, we're trying, we want to learn. And I was embraced, not because of my music talent, but because of me being just a human being in the Covenant Church. I was loved by me just being a human being in the Covenant Church. And that was so important. That's what I love about the Covenant. Regardless of what color you are, regardless to how tall you are, regardless to your gifts, you're still welcome, accepted, and appreciated in the Evangelical Covenant Church. So for my brothers and sisters in the Covenant, we have a greater role. Our role is we have to share that love, but also listen to the stories. I did share the story of Windsor, Colorado, but one thing that I did not share was there were Covenant pastors in this restaurant who were walking with us, but they never stood up for us. They never said, hey, wait a minute, that's my brother. As a matter of fact, some of them laughed at the slurs that were being hurled at us. We got to stand together. As Covenanters, we got to stand together, not because it's a white person standing with a black person or a white person standing with a brown person. It's we got to stand together because we are knitted together. We got the same blood. It's the blood of Christ. We're knitted together. We're sticking together. We're wound, or we're weaved together through the power of the Holy Spirit. And in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, when he said, you shall have power, that's one of the things that we have the power to do, to stand together, to listen to each other, and to fight against the injustices of humanity, regardless to who commits them, regardless to when they're committed or where they're committed. So in the Covenant Church, instead of being angry at a person, instead of being angry at individuals, I wrote the mayor of Minneapolis. I looked at his name. His name is Jacob Frey. And I realized that that name has a Jewish background. And I said to him, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm praying for you. And I gave him the scripture of Joshua chapter 1, verse 9, be strong and courageous. Because I understand that most people read the book of Joshua and they know that phrase, be strong and courageous. And I said, it's not about this particular situation. It's about the system of injustice in the world. I'm not saying that I had influence on the mayor, but I'm saying that's one of the ways that we can stand together. We can stand together by pulling together, hearing the story, and then responding in the way that God has gifted us. I talked to a young man this morning. He's gifted in song. So he is composing a song about unity, not about this incident, about unity. And if we can remember, I think it was, if we can remember the good old days where we played together, we walked together, we learned together, and we lived together. It's a beautiful, it sounds like it's going to be a beautiful song. We have to address, in whatever way God has blessed us, how do we address the horrible issues, not just of racism, but classism and sexism as well. We have to address these issues all as one with the purpose of glorifying God, not glorifying ourselves.
Thank you, Joseph, and thank you for your testimony of the Evangelical Covenant Church, because you're right, we are not a perfect denomination, far from it, but we do try.
Yes,
we do try. From worship at our events, from preaching at our events, from workshops, from trainings, from having representation in every department. But you know, sincerely, the multicultural world is so difficult and so messy,
Oh, yeah.
and people just give up in the middle of that because it's just sometimes we just deem it not worth it. But I do remember you just triggered a memory. I took a group of pastors to a retreat center in Arizona, Surprise, Arizona. I think it was Surprise, and and I said, hey, there's, you know, I checked on Google Maps. There was a Dairy Queen very close by. Let's walk. It was maybe a mile, which was a long way under the sun. But we went to get some ice cream, right? And I treated my brown brothers to ice cream. When we were at Dairy Queen, there was a gentleman there, an older gentleman with a gun, with a holster. And we said hello, order our ice cream, sat in the air conditioning restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And he came up to me, he goes, where are you all from? And I'm like, oh, from different cities. I'm from, I was in San Diego at the time. They're from Chicago, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no, 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 where are you really from?
Oh.
And I'm like, you mean my parents? They're like, yeah, where are you all from? And I go, we're Latin Americans. And he goes, and are you here legally? I mean, somehow this gentleman felt that he had the entitlement to ask me for my legal status. It wasn't enough that I spoke English. It wasn't enough that I wasn't committing a crime or that I looked suspicious. He just felt, with a gun, of course, which can be very threatening, especially to people like me that have never used guns.
Oh, yeah.
To be threatened like that. So, yeah, anyway, you wrote an incredible piece in your blog called I Can't Breathe. Was it again? Or I Can't Breathe? Yeah, I Can't Breathe Again. Tell me a little bit about your intent with writing that. What was pastorally, what were you thinking? What was your intention?
I think I had three motives. The first one was to express myself. I wanted to get this out of me because I am tired. I am tired of these meaningless killings. And I wanted to get this out of me, and I wanted to put it down on paper. The second reason was to call attention to the African American community, that we have to do more than just put hashtag RIP and the person's name, because that's a notch in someone's belt. But we have to stand and we have to look at things differently. We have to invade this current system of injustice. We have to infiltrate it whatever way possible, and we have to dissimulate it. It has to be totally destroyed. It has to be annihilated. We got to get rid of it. So I wanted them to, in some way, whatever way God has gifted them, to know that we all stand together in this. We must oppose this system of injustice. But the third reason why I wanted to write, because I wanted to alert those people who are not African American. I wanted to alert them that, hey, this is really going on, and I need you. I need you now more than ever to stand with me, to hear my story. If you can't feel my pain, sit with me while I cry. Just hear me sob. I wanted everyone to know that we're all in this together. It was a cry for unity and for peace. I remember in November 22nd, 1963, that was the day that President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. We were in the Oakland Symphony in the 5th grade. And we came out, I saw the flags at half-mast, and I asked our teacher who had taken us, Ms. Crabb, why are the flags at half-mast? What does that mean? And she says, I don't know, let's turn on the news. And that's when they announced that President Kennedy had been killed. Valley Jackson was in that car with me. Valley wept strong tears, more than anyone else. And we sat with Valley because we knew Valley Jackson and we knew the story. When we were in the 5th grade, we had to choose pen pals. She chose John F. Kennedy. And he would write her letters and send her birthday cards.
Mm.
And so when she was weeping, it was a different perspective of tears.
It was personal.
So we sat with her as she cried tears, and we became her strength. We became one with her.
Mm.
And in this article, I was asking, whatever color you are, whatever city you live in, be with me, sit with me, because I need you now. I'm broken. I feel destroyed. I'm vulnerable, but I need your strength. I need your love. I need your assurance that at least you will understand I'm in pain.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think you said it so well. It really struck me. I read it several times. Some of our brothers and sisters that do not have relationships with African Americans, or I mean, don't consider themselves part of the problem. You know, they didn't do any of what we're talking about, but are missing that relationship. I think that's what's great about the covenant, that provides a place for us to do that. Some of my dearest friends and mentors, people like you, people like Sherwood Carthen, who was bigger than life. I mean, just our brother who was just amazing, who passed away a few years. People that have shaped me, you know, Brian Murphy from California, just people and we have nothing to gain from investing in people, right? But it is, you know, I'm a child of the covenant. I've been shaped here. I've been formed by so many people, a lot of Anglo brothers and sisters, African American brothers and sisters, Asian Americans, Native Americans, Latinos, and so it bothers me when people tell me that this is a political issue. Because it is not a political issue, in my opinion. It may be everything is political, but we make it political because we want to pit people against each other, right? How do you respond to that? How do you respond about this being political and you know, what's your sense of that?
Well, first of all, it is not a political issue. It is a humanity issue. It is one where justice, fairness, where equality is being denied. So it is all of our responsibility to make sure that those are qualities of life everyone can enjoy. So it's not a political issue. So a Democrat or a Republican or a liberal or a Whig or a Tory or anyone else all have the same responsibility to make sure that everyone is treated with decency and respect. So it's not a political issue. However, right now, we do know that this current administration seems to embolden racism and classism in a different way. I've never seen so many people angry at one another, angry at people of color in my life as I have now. I've never heard such insulting statements coming from people in political positions of power that are demeaning and condescending just because of your color. I've never seen that before. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but I've never seen it. And because I've never seen it before, I have to say that it looks like it's political because it has a political force behind it. When you view the current administration, you won't see people of color standing there. You will see one particular color, and that says that that is the dominant supreme color. That is the one that gets to call the shots. So it looks to some like it's a political problem. But we say it's political because that's easy for us, because I'm not political, to not get involved. To not get involved. As long as it's political and I'm not political, I don't have to be involved in it. Michael Poindexter made a very, very good presentation. He talked about MASH. And in MASH, he talked about this particular episode where Corporal Klinger stated that oh gosh, I forgot the statement. I forgot exactly. But it has to do with before the storm, it's good that the bird hides his nose or something like that. But what he was saying is, the main point of it was, since I botched the whole story, it's not good to hide your head in the sand and to ignore what's going on.
Right, right.
So for my brothers and sisters who have not had a chance to listen to the story, to meet a person who is different from you, you have to be intentional about this. You just can't meet them at midwinter and say, I met that person. You have to be intentional about getting to know, about making time to hear their story. That is what's so beautiful about Sankofa. Sankofa is not just a journey to go back to the South, but it's actually hearing the story of the struggle from the partner that you're with, and then experiencing their relief that that story is no longer true. It's also a wonderful part, which I love about the covenant. You said about meeting people. I remember Garth McGrath, one of your superintendent brothers. Garth had been away from Midwinter for a few years. And I'm in Chicago at the bookstore Midwinter, and he walks in and he takes this bold approach to meet me, and he intentionally walks over to me. And he intentionally says, hi, my name is Garth. And I'm from, I think it was from Minnesota. And he's introducing himself and he's talking to me. Where are you from? So I tell him, I didn't say I'm music. I didn't say I'm on the team or anything. I just said, I'm Josef Rasheed. I'm from DeSoto, Texas, Crossroads Church. And he says, it's really good to meet you. We talked about 15 minutes in the bookstore. Garth's story is, when the music starts that evening, he looks up on the stage, and here I am on the stage, and I'm playing music, and Garth turns to everybody who's sitting around them, people who he doesn't know, and he says, that's my friend up there.
I know him.
And so intentionally, we have to get out of our comfort zones, and intentionally, we have to go up and meet people. But we can't meet them on our terms. We have to allow them to be themselves and get to know them.
I love that.
Knowing we got to understand their story and be patient to listen.
I love that. I love that. When I joined the Council of Superintendents almost 3 years ago, everyone there was a friend of mine.
Yeah.
There was no one that there was one person that I didn't know as well. He was new. He came in after me, Glenn Peterson, who's become a dear friend, now. But everyone there I knew and I enjoyed being with, and I think that's just really great. So what is your hope for the church? What does solidarity look like in this time when you see people of color being, sacrificed? I mean, it is really, why were people subjugated before you so they could learn what their place was? What is your hope for the church, for the majority church, for the multicultural church, for the covenant church? What, even though your op-ed, your writing was poignant, there was hope in it. What is your hope for the church?
Well, my hope for the church, and I want to start with our church first. Our church is the Evangelical Covenant Church, and we are definitely not perfect. But my hope for the church is we will make time and space, not just to talk about this over the ministerium page on Facebook, but we will have discussions of the stories of people in a different way now, not just to hear a personal story, but to hear the cultural stories that make us who we are. My hope for our church is that we will then unite together after hearing these stories, and then we will infect other denominations in our societies around us. Each one of us as covenant pastors are in a different city. We're in a city that has potential, and we can infect that city just through the stories that we know and the people who we know. We can infect that city with such a desire to be one instead of divided, I think that that's a great hope for me. I'm hoping that with a multicultural church, that we can also go beyond this. But before I go to the multicultural church, let me go to this other church, this multi-denominational church. You remember Martin Luther King, he had Presbyterians, Catholics, Lutherans, Baptists, and all kinds of people walking with him. They were protesting with him. He called the church together for the cause of humanity. I'm hoping that our church, the evangelical church, I'm hoping that the Evangelical Covenant Church is able to call denominations together and to rally and to unite for the cause of humanity, justice, for the cause of goodwill to all people, regardless if it's Black or brown or red or yellow. Let's call people together and let's march for the cause of Christ. I'm also hoping that we as pastors, we will unite and we will take a stand, not just to preach the gospel, but to bring hope to the hurting. There are people in Minneapolis right now who are protesting. They're angry. They need hope.
Yeah.
And to a great degree, we are essential. We are essential because we are the providers of hope.
Yeah.
We're essential because we're the providers of healing. So my hope is that we as pastors, regardless to what color we are, we will come together. We will unite. And if we got to do it like Sankofa and get one-on-one and go out and go out to these areas and be sponsored by our church to address these issues, that's my hope, that we will do that to infect intentionally a society that's ill with the healing power of Jesus Christ.
Amen. Amen. And I wanted to ask you a more self-serving question. As far as joy in music, and you are a piano player, is that your main instrument?
That's my main instrument.
Okay, but you're also master vocalist. Are you a tenor or are you a baritone?
I'm a baritone.
You're a baritone.
But I was forced to sing tenor, because that was the style.
Yeah.
So, every now and then I try to run up there and do this and do that, but I'm really a baritone.
Yeah, I have had quite a bit of desire to go back into music. This position doesn't really allow me to I don't have a lot of free time. But about a year ago, I decided that I was going to put more music in my life and decided to go to a studio once a month on my day off and start recording an album that's going to be due out this summer.
Oh, wow.
And it's been such a joyful experience. I didn't know I had more music in me. That sounds weird, right? I've written over 100 songs and recorded over 10 albums, but I didn't know I had another one in me. What are you doing to keep that joy and the music and the singing? And where are you finding joy in what kind of music, or what are you doing that's giving you joy in music?
That's very interesting because, in the Black church, historically, once you begin to preach, you leave music alone if you play music. Oh, gosh, how horrible that is. Well, it was a great joy to serve in the covenant and play music and be accepted. That was wonderful. Mm-hmm. What have I been doing? Well, besides just playing music, I play here in my home, but I've started again to write music, and I'm starting to record. I actually have a little board right here, a digital board right here, that I've been starting to do more recording just for myself. And I want to keep it alive. I want to keep it active because I realized something in my study of Revelation. All the preaching will be gone. Offerings will be no more. There'll be no more greeters. There'll be no more appeals, but there will be music. And so because there'll be music in heaven, it seems like it's okay for me to do it right here on earth. So I am trying to keep my music alive by writing, by creating, by taking my time, my personal time, to create new songs, to write new songs, to develop old songs, to practice my skills, and to bring that gift back to life. Yeah. That's
awesome. Well, I appreciate, and I know that the covenant will appreciate those gifts as well.
And I want to say it was joyful and absolutely wonderful to have the privilege and the opportunity to serve on a worship team with you. I think it was 2 years ago, I came to Chicago and we went to your annual meeting.
Yeah.
And it was just fantastic. I loved every bit of it. You did a concert that reminded me of the Danny that I first met. The one with so much light, the one who had so much laughter, the one who had so much joy, who wasn't bogged down with this report, who wasn't bogged down with that report, but who had this freedom of expression. What a joy that was. And that inspired me. That was a big inspiration for me to gather musicians and to gather friends and say, hey, man, let's revisit this whole thought in a brand new way and let's make it real this time. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for that studio tip too. I'm going to try that. That's real good.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being a part of that celebration. You brought the house down and the musicians all loved you. Surprise, surprise, right?
Oh,
And
wow.
and also the many times we played, national events, and I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for your wisdom. I mean, it's not just music that I've sought your wisdom on. I've invited you to very early breakfasts so that we can, so I can tell you about my personal life, and I can ask
I'm
for
glad that you paid for them too.
if I'm getting some major counseling, I should, right? So, but no, you are such a gift to our denomination. You are such a gift to me. We're very, very glad that we serve the Lord here. All right. Yeah. Love you, my brother. Thank you so much
Love
for
you
your.
now. All right. God bless.
Bye.